I've been a cameraman for roughly 25 years. I've attacked Hollywood via helicopters, and I worked as a camera assistant, and now I've become a director of photography and creator of music videos, feature projects, commercials, anything one can put on film these days. And my obsession and fascination is building tools for the trade of cinematography, coming up with new ways of making cameras move to places they could not otherwise go. And I'm fairly obsessed with making good documentaries on the other side of the spectrum, so between those two things I try to keep as busy as I can. Yeah, the Steadicam it was a brilliant invention by Garrett Brown back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's been around for quite some time now, nearly 50 years. It's a brilliant invention, actually, initially, and it hasn't really changed all that much. It's evolved in little tiny bits here and there, but it's an ingenious solution to maneuvering the weight of a camera, making that camera basically gravity-free, very maneuverable, and very steady. It isolates the camera from the motions of the human body, but doesn't require 3,000 pounds of dolly track and jib arms and all sorts of other hardware to move. So the Steadicam is a great way to move a fairly lightweight camera around. The Steadicam is a vest, an arm, and a gimbal. They're three essential pieces that they're fairly physically difficult things to build, and so I've been sort of evolving each piece a little bit at a time to make the machine work better than the man. But I've sort of taken advantage of my skill set that I'd learned in the aerial cinematography world, putting cameras on helicopters and gyro stabilizing camera systems, as is a Westcam. Is essentially a balanced camera system like the Steadicam, and sort of remote controlled balanced camera system. Steadicam is a more manually operated balanced steady system, whereas the Westcam works on joysticks and in the safety of the inside of the helicopter, fortunately. So I've sort of segued from aerial work to doing Steadicam work from there designing jibs and other ways to make cameras pretty much go where they're not supposed to be. The beauty of a jib is it can essentially get above and beyond. It's the bird's eye view. Of course, the aerial cinematography is the ultimate bird's eye view, from as high as one can get nearly and come down in on a shot. From there on down to the ground you would have a jib, and from the ground you'd have a Steadicam to maneuver it around at sort of a fixed altitude. But with a jib you can go from the ground level directly up. My jib goes up to about 15 feet and I can look straight down on something. So if you go up in 15 feet and go full wide, you can pretty much present a sizable piece of real estate. It's great for master shots of 100 people, sort of booming down into a single shot of someone speaking directly into camera. So it's a great way to segue from gigantically wide master shot to a single in one shot, or a variety of shots. Plus, you can put the jib arm on a dolly and have it a moving, talking two-shot, or so many different actually variabilities. It's insane. Plus, you can pan, you can boom up and down, and my jib arm actually has a remote head on it. There are lots of smaller jibs that don't necessarily have a remote head. You can put the camera on the end and basically in a fixed position, but you still basically you can pan, you can tilt. Incidentally, camcorders seem to be shrinking on a daily basis. Each generation seems to get smaller, lighter, and better, strangely enough. But you can put your camcorder onto a fluid head and put it on a small piece of track where you can start and stop a shot with a good solid static shot, and you can maneuver over and just changes the perspective of the background. Just a little bit of movement always adds to the character of a shot. It gains a little bit more energy psychologically by moving. That's so easily accomplished just by a tracking shot of 3 or 4 feet, quickly or extremely slowly. So, moving cameras, I've got 3 ways. I've got my Steadicam, my jib arm, my tracker, and my 4th creation is going to be my 3-axis jib. I don't know how else to move cameras, so I'm pretty much going to run out of solutions to my problem of perpetual motion in motion pictures soon enough. Despite the fact that I enjoy building tools to move cameras, one can tell a story infinitely better by not using those tools and just going with a very unambitious static shot, providing the character is you know, has enough to say or enough to exchange to the audience that it becomes sufficiently interesting. Although oftentimes we use our tools to basically energize the shot through movement. Sometimes less tools are more, and sometimes the reverse. I seem to make my living on the reverse, but as a cameraman, I'm a gigantic fan of just finding a fantastic shot and just walking away from it, and letting the talent or the subject, whichever it may be, just sort of fill the frame without your filling the frame from behind. So. But I got into solar because I live on a sailboat, and I travel out to the islands as much as possible, and one needs power to, you know, refrigerate and watch movies, because that's most of what we do out there. But living on a boat, I've got 300 watts of solar power, and it's more than enough to survive on a daily basis. It runs my electronics, my navigation, my radar, my refrigeration, and, all sorts of stuff. So I've become fairly obsessive about solar power. I've got solar on my boat, I've got solar on top of my car, which runs my laptop. I've got several solar panels here. I'm the only AC in Hollywood with a rolling solar-powered camera card. So I can charge batteries without plugging into outlets, which may not be found at times. Almost always. It's always a pain in the butt to find power to charge your batteries to make your camera work. And cameras are very thirsty creatures these days as well. Almost always swapping out batteries, but a day like today I've got 75 watts of power coming out of this panel, running a small inverter. So I'm a big fan and a believer in sort of micro solar power. I'm a believer in solar powering your entire house with you know, 30,000 watts of solar power and getting off the grid entirely. However, you know, I've got a solar cell on my car which powers my laptop. I've got multiple mobile solar cells and small inverters, so I can get AC power almost anywhere I go in small quantities. I'm not going to run a table saw off that thing, but you know, that's what generators are for. So I'm very into solar power, and it's absolutely it's critical these days. Frankly, I think if we subtract as much as we can from the carbon footprint that we each have, then we're all better off collectively. Definitely, the art of cinematography has changed extensively in the last, certainly in the last decade, if not the last year. It changes on a daily basis, quite frankly. Every successive film set one goes to, there's just mostly a new manner of grabbing data. Data being the imagery that we try to make look as good as we can as cameramen. It used to wind up on silver halide crystals. That doesn't happen anymore, unfortunately, for the people of Rochester, New York. My being a veteran of Rochester, New York, and the Kodak life, I miss those days. But it's a new. Simply, the medium has changed. Initially, as cinematographers, we all thought, you know, there's no way that videotape will ever surpass the beauty of the crystal halide, which it's a great means to portray, you know, a story. However, it's changed significantly and way faster than any of us thought it would, and for a good, all basically for the betterment of cinematography. The means, it simply really doesn't matter ultimately. I mean, being a good cameraman is simply picking a frame, composing it, and making it look good, or making it look, by all means, in a manner that supports the script, frankly, and not just our egos to make a shot look great and beautiful and fantastic. But it really needs to support the story. And in the end, I think it's becoming easier and certainly quicker and easier and more efficient to capture with digital high definition. Filmmaking is evolving from industry to an art form, perhaps in an odd way, perhaps in the best way conceivable in the history of humanity. That we're all sort of we all have palettes and paintbrushes we need to portray humanity in a better and a bigger way to benefit more people ultimately. Whereas cinematography 50 years ago was it was the art of very few people who would just sort of climb the ladder into Hollywood and learn to make great cinematography, just leap off the screen into the film viewers' skulls. But now it's so much easier and so much better, and I can only look at all the better things that will result from this.